That was a very interesting turn in the curriculum of the Culinary Institute of America, where the leaders at that point of time had a clear sense that for the future chef, they need to be trained in cooking and, of course, baking and wine. I would say the three disciplines of haute cuisine, but they also needed to be trained in culture and especially cultural difference. To be a great chef, you probably have to talk about a lot more than cooking, baking, and the wine list. And that was my job.
This is Copper and Heat, the podcast exploring the unspoken rules and traditions of restaurants. I'm Katie Osuna. Today, we're asking the question, is culinary school worth it? Back in 2015, I was debating whether or not it was worth it for me to go to culinary school. I had a bachelor's in anthropology, I'd studied food, and I'd worked in restaurants, and I was about to move from Boise, Idaho, a smaller city, to the San Francisco Bay Area. So I was thinking, is it worth it for me to drop tens of thousands of dollars and take on more debt to go to school? Ultimately, I decided yes. So I spent about $30,000, or rather got some scholarships and took out loans, to do a 9-month program with the International Culinary Center. I spent the first 6 months learning classic French techniques like ratatouille and sauce américaine and decorating big platters with colored gelatin for my terrines. I certainly learned a lot of basic French techniques, but very few of them have I used since. And I learned next to nothing about other cuisines and cultures outside of France. The most valuable part of the schooling, and honestly, the reason I really wanted to go to school, was for the connections. Moving to a new city where I didn't know anyone and wanting to work in the best restaurants I could, I needed connections. And that was worth it. The school connected me to my externship at a 1 Michelin star restaurant and then the 3-star restaurant I staged at later. But was culinary school worth the 9 months and the $30,000? I definitely developed some basic skills racing my classmates to break down a chicken or a fillet of fish. I did get that foot in the door in fine dining that I probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. But I've also noticed a huge gap in my knowledge when it comes to techniques that aren't French or cuisines that aren't from Europe. So when it comes to getting students prepared for a career as a cook or a chef, I started to question the ways in which culinary schools define the role of chef, and therefore, how they prepare us for it.
What is a profession? A profession is something that gives you returns in money and prestige, which is more than minimum wage.
This is Krishnendu Ray, who you heard at the top of the episode.
Okay, I'm Krishnendu Ray. I'm the professor of food studies at NYU.
Before his time at NYU, Krishnendu taught at and was dean at the CIA.
When I say CIA, I have to clarify, it's the other CIA. So it's the Culinary Institute of America.
So when I started thinking about culinary schools and whether or not it prepares students for a career as a chef, I was recommended his book, The Ethnic Restaurateur, and there was a chapter that stuck out to me in particular.
This chapter is called Extending Expertise, and I didn't realize I was so deeply pessimistic there. And I'll tell you what it is for the audience. I'm saying haute cuisine, cooking in a high-end restaurant, is a particular kind of cooking and a particular form of professionalization that has to distinguish itself from home cooking, which is mostly women's cooking, and poor people's cooking in the marketplace, which is brown and black people's cooking in the marketplace.
And a big part of what Krishnendu discusses in his book and in this chapter is how restaurants and culinary schools work to professionalize the career of chef and the tensions there. Because to professionalize the career of chef means, as he says, to bring the job more money and prestige, which is great since the jobs of cooks and chefs have been historically undervalued, but that also comes with some baggage. But let's back up to when Krishnendu first started at the CIA.
My advisor, Mark Selden, though he had discouraged me from changing my topic, he ran into an ad in the Chronicle of Higher Education where the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, they wanted to hire someone who had a PhD or was working on a PhD. And at this point of time, I think I was called something that's glorious name in grad school called ABD, which is all but dissertation. They wanted to hire someone who could teach history and cultures of the Americas, history and cultures of Asia, history and cultures of Europe. I went for the interview. Coming from India, I had never worn a suit. I had never worn a tie. And I bought my first tie and I bought my first suit. I think it was a Kmart. And I drove to the Hudson Valley to give the interview. And the interview was wretchedly early, like 7 o'clock in the morning. And so here I was supposed to show up at an interview, meet all these very officious-looking white people with all kinds of European accents and teach a class. So the first thing I did at the breakfast was knock down a glass of orange juice, and orange juice was all over the table, and it was a mess. I said, okay, this thing is not going down very well. Eventually, they offered me the job, so presumably it went well, and I ended up as the acting dean of liberal arts.
The need for culinary schools to attract new students and adapt to a changing world has only grown since Krishnendu was at CIA. Currently, culinary schools are feeling the impacts of COVID rippling through the industry. Many different programs have closed, including 2 Johnson & Wales campuses in 2020. Even before the pandemic, Le Cordon Bleu closed all of its outposts in the U.S. The school I attended has also since closed its doors. The number of people going back to work in restaurants is way down since COVID, and enrollment in culinary schools is taking a similar turn. At the CIA, 97% of applicants are now accepted, compared to the 36% they accepted 20 years ago. And of those 97%, only 33% end up enrolling. Johnson & Wales also saw a 23% decrease in applicants and enrollment. Lack of benefits, lower pay potential, and the challenges of life in the kitchen are making the career seem less appealing to those that might enter culinary schools. And the current job market is making jobs less competitive, and therefore the need for a culinary degree or education even less necessary.
Places that I've worked, being in a tourist town where they're like, oh my God, we need employees.
This is Hannele.
My name is Hannele. Most people know me as Lady Line Cook on Instagram.
In addition to running a hilarious Instagram account, Hannele has worked her way up to sous chef without going to culinary school.
Like, we'll teach you everything. I don't care if you don't have experience, you look like you want to learn. We'll teach you.
Do you have a passion for cooking? A desire to learn more about the craft of professional food preparation?
Well, I love working with chefs who see what they're doing as a craft and an art form, a way to nourish people and really give back to the world.
We have an amazing opportunity for students. You're working alongside a real chef each and every day.
That's just been my experience. Right now as the sous chef, I've ran a couple specials, but I don't write the menu or anything. So I definitely feel if I were to actually have to come up with a menu or come up with dishes, that's kind of where those gaps would be in terms of not going to culinary school. But honestly, I've only been in the industry full time for 3 years. There's still so much more for me to learn, just on the job. Obviously, I learned how to work in a kitchen and learn how to run a kitchen, learn how to work a line, learn a lot of cooking techniques from where I currently work. So I feel like that's never been an issue for me, not having that kind of culinary school book knowledge.
That book knowledge comes at a price. The average cost for a culinary program is around $30,000. One semester of tuition before books or anything like that at the CIA is $16,925. Of course, 4-year programs aren't the only option. A 2-year associate's program averages around $14,000 in its entirety. The cost is there, and potential students are looking at debt to start a career where many entry-level positions, and some even higher positions, don't have a huge payoff. Being able to take time away from earning to learn is most easily achieved by those who have financial privilege. Loans can help ease the burden of school costs, but with some programs not eligible for federal funding, this can be a challenge to navigate.
I personally think that there's no right way to do this, and obviously the way that I did it is a little bit different and more unique to the industry, but doesn't necessarily make it better.
This is Annika, who has worked in 2 and 3 Michelin star places from LA to New York.
I'm a 3 Michelin star tomato peeler. And part of the reason I say that is because it's nice on a resume to say that, yes, I was working at Quince when I was 19, but at the same time, it's like I was a prep cook. It does not make me better than the next person who works in Nebraska as a fry cook. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that I was dealt a good card and I took it. I was learning what I needed to learn, and I ended up in a pretty good spot right now, so I don't really feel the need to go incur all that debt.
Instead of culinary school, Annika took every opportunity while at university to stage during summers and on breaks.
I was working in kitchens while I was in college, so I kind of just figured I was learning that way. Like, slowly and surely, one of the first tasks I had to do in the middle of busy season was to work that rotisserie station and learn how to butcher cooked chicken, cut it up for service, and break it down and put them back on a spit and hang them back up on the rotisserie. And that was pretty much my job for the majority of that season. And that's something that you could learn in culinary school. I was learning how to, slowly but surely picking up different things here and there, and eventually it kind of just added up. Staging was my culinary school. A lot of the times I went into stages knowing that I wasn't looking for a job, and that was really great because I was just there to observe and to learn. And on the occasions where I was able to work, because sometimes they just want you to stand in a corner and not touch anything, but in the occasions that I was able to work, it's really great because I get to see similar patterns. I get to notice how this kitchen is run versus that kitchen is run. What are the similarities between fine dining restaurants versus restaurants at the 1-star Bib Gourmand level? I think it's a really great experience, and it's shown me a lot. I don't know what they teach in culinary school, but I do know now that there's several ways to skin a cat, and that every restaurant is going to do something differently. So even if you do have a base from some sort of education, it's going to be different wherever you walk into.
Ooh, it's so funny, actually, because even in culinary school, when we did the chicken your way, I tried to do a home-cooked meal, smothered chicken, just like a huge staple in my family.
This is Kaya.
I'm Kaya Fuller. I am co-owner and chef of Far Out Catering, based in Campbell, California.
She went to the International Culinary Center, the same culinary school that I did, and one of the things that we had to do during the second level of our training program was we had to break down a chicken and then cook it however we wanted, and then present it to our chef for tasting.
One of my favorite meals is just a deep fried chicken and a white wine sauce that's reduced, and it's super yummy with roasted carrots, and you can do it over potatoes or you can do it over egg noodles. A really delicious, home hearty dish that I always enjoyed growing up. And so I kind of did that for my chicken your way level 2 of a culinary school. And so it was just funny, just hearing the chef's remarks. I was like, oh, this is good, but it's so hearty. So it was just funny getting that criticism.
As Krishnendu said at the very beginning, attempting to separate the idea of a professional chef and the skills and craft associated with that position from the home cook has led to a lot of distinctions around what is considered quote-unquote good and what is not. And this is based in a lot of racism, like how traditionally black foods are considered lowbrow. It's also based in a lot of sexism, how food cooked by women at home for the purpose of nourishment is not as skillful. And it's also based in a lot of Eurocentrism, like how French food has been considered the preeminent cuisine when it comes to education, including at the school where Kaya and I went, which was originally called the French Culinary Institute, and only changed to International Culinary Center when they started adding Italian cuisine.
I think you see that in plates, especially in dishes where it's a really home-cooked, authentic meal, no matter what background that you come from. But they try to elevate it by, okay, let's give them half a portion and call that a full meal and you'll be full off of that. I think it's always trying to bring things in and make it smaller, even though to really appreciate the dish is a complete stew or something like that. It's a complete full hearty dish, which is what the most authentic thing about home cooking is, that it is hearty, and it is that you're full afterwards and things like that. But I think to refine it, they say, oh, let's do smaller portions and take out as much fat and everything, all the goodness out of it, basically.
But the world is changing, and incoming students are becoming less enamored with what has traditionally been considered valuable in the restaurant industry.
Probably 13 years ago, when I started teaching at the Culinary Institute of America,
This is Dr. Beth Forrest, who is currently teaching at the CIA.
I'm Dr. Beth Forrest. I am a professor of liberal arts and food studies at the Culinary Institute of America and the current president of the Association for the Study of Food and Society. If I were to ask our students, our beginning students, who wants to earn a Michelin star one day, I think overarching hands were up, 90+%. And now, when I ask that same question, far fewer hands go up, which I think is an interesting response. I think perhaps in some ways fewer of our students know about Michelin Guide. But on the other hand, I think far more of our students are engaged in a much broader conversation about food. So they understand that there are a variety of avenues in which to either highlight artistry and craft, but also the ubiquitous role of food in society and how value and craft can extend not just in the kitchen, but on the farm, in the classroom, also be able to access such craft and food with their values in mind, and not just for the wealthy. So the conversation has extended.
As the world changes, culinary schools have to find ways to keep up with those changes and appeal to students, while also still training them in what is considered essential to the industry, and competing with other schools for those students. The current state of the industry, plus access to knowledge and non-traditional cooking jobs via the internet, have added an additional layer of complications. But this is something that institutions have been navigating for a long time. And even in the late 90s and early 2000s, Krishnendu was at the Culinary Institute of America navigating these things.
So I think it was partly a new kind of student was entering with a new kind of a class attitude, the new kind of cultural capital, and food was becoming more than just grunt work invisible in the kitchen. The leaders at that point of time, including the dean, Fred Mayo, and Tim Ryan, the vice president then, who will eventually be the president, had a clear sense that for the future chef, they need to be trained in cooking and, of course, baking and wine. I would say the three disciplines of haute cuisine, but they also needed to be trained in culture and especially cultural difference. And the other one was community health and sustainability. So this is, say, 1996. This was also a way for the CIA to distinguish themselves from the 500 cooking schools they're competing with. They could either compete at the level of price and go to the bottom, or they could compete at the level of a brand and creating, in some ways, to use the term, a funny term now, called organic intellectuals. Organic, not literally organic agriculture, but organic as in a chef who can talk about not only cooking and baking and the wine list, but who can also talk about questions of sustainability, questions of cultural difference.
So Krishnendu was hired, as he said at the beginning of this episode, as an academic, someone who could help teach this new brand of chef the things that the CIA was finding important by talking to chefs that were working in the industry.
Tim Ryan was then the vice president, and he's now the president of the CIA. He had started wondering, do we need to teach our students all the mother sauces, French mother sauces? He said he talked to his colleagues, he talked to his friends, and they said in 1996, yes. But the question was already there in his mind, So we were mostly doing French mother sauces, but then Italian pasta making, fresh pasta, was just introduced after I joined the Culinary Institute, and that became a domain of necessity. Italian food was foregrounded. So Italian was added, I would say, through the 1990s. That's rather late because I think Italian cuisine becomes visible in the marketplace as high-end cuisine through the 1980s and into the 1990s. But as a teaching institution, we are usually a little more conservative than the marketplace because you don't want to follow every fad.
This question of what is a fad versus what is considered something that is essential for new cooks and chefs to learn is something that needs to be challenged to change, especially when the people making or advising the curriculum, like executive chefs in the industry, are predominantly white men.
Indian, of course, being where I'm coming from, we added various Indian cuisines. And of course, India is like a continent. You have 121 languages. And wherever there's a language, there's a cuisine. So what Indian? So it tends to be mostly Northern Indian. and then we added a bit of Thai. By the way, at this point of time, I went on to teach what we call the Asian kitchen, which was called the Oriental kitchen when I got there. And I said, we got to change the name because this thing is not going to work. Oriental is an Orientalist word. And that's what I went to really bat for. And I said, we got to change it to something else. There was a resistance because Oriental looked meaningful to mostly white working class folks and cooks who saw Oriental as well. That's Chinese food, kind of a little bit of Japanese food, maybe Thai food. Okay. And I said two things. We'll have to change the name to Asian because Oriental in 1996 began to sound like Negro, not an epithet, but outdated. And similarly, Oriental had come to be seen as Orientalist. So we worked for a couple of years, changed the name to Asian. And I would say the most of the cooking in the kitchen was hotel Chinese cooking. And that was beginning to change then we added, Japanese was added. Remember, this is when sushi was really exploding as a new thing. Iron Chef Japan was becoming visible, though there was no ramen at that point of time. Ramen is much later. This is the sukiyaki to sushi transition. By the way, at this point of time, none of this is in the professional chef, the Bible of the students. I was there at the CIA when the 5th edition was coming through. And that was the first edition. You have the mother sauces as foundations, but you begin to break away. Soy sauce begins to show up. Fish sauce begins to show up. And the garam masala begins to show up. And even the idea that that curry is not something that comes out of a box, but that it is fresh ground. Now I think the latest edition is 9th edition. And my presumption is when the next edition comes out, they wouldn't know what to do because there's no center to hold American haute cuisine anymore. It is falling apart for a good reason. It is becoming less Eurocentric, and we are just beginning to do that, I think, in this generation. And that's why it's exciting. The process of radical change is such that the center is falling apart. And the center was the French sauces. And we really had Japanese influence relatively early, already on the French, but now we cannot stop. Not only the Thai, the Indian, the Vietnamese influences, but also the Southern Black influences. So I think it's a really exciting moment where American cuisine is falling apart, is a positive thing. It's high time and exciting time.
New ideas and concepts can be added by administration to keep the curriculum current, but it's a challenge. And what seems to be happening is that students are the ones that are really bringing about change.
So I went for a decade, I think 1996, about 2005. And I think those were really transformative decades for a leading organization. And I clearly saw a couple of things. And some of it, in fact, were driven by new students. The first change they demanded is they wanted a vegetarian main course to be available from every kitchen. So they were taking my ethics class, and the ethics class effectively became an advocacy class, how to change an institution. So they said it's absurd that you have, 30-some kitchens, and not one kitchen produces composed vegetarian meal. And some of them were vegetarian by practice, and most of the old-fashioned chefs had no idea how to respond to it, how to react to it. Some of the younger chefs who had come from California, had traveled in Southeast Asia, had traveled in South Asia, and if you knew how to cook outside of the domain of the French mother sauces, the main animal protein at the heart of the dish, they could create some very interesting place. Any educational institution cannot be a faddist one, right? You have to wait and watch. And so in some ways, this always upsets my younger students, more impatient. Their job is to be impatient, even like place like NYU, right? We had social justice courses, but they were not front and center everywhere. And the Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement has radically forced us at NYU to relook at all our syllabus, which I did, I think, last summer. And endless, very entangled, very fractious negotiations with a student organization called FARE, F-A-R-E. But that's the nature of an educational institution. It should not be a faddist institution. That also was true with the Culinary Institute. And you cannot just follow every fad. You have to see if it's durable. Okay? And remember, when you're in the middle of it, you don't know whether it's durable. Durability only comes in retrospect, looking back. You say, okay, this sushi thing is not a fad. And my job as a young Turk, so to say, was to be disruptive, was to argue for change. But the job of Tim Ryan and Fred Mayo was to slow me down so that we were not such an outlier, that we were going to train people in things that they did not need training in.
This week's topic is very heavily debated in the culinary world, so I just want you guys to remain respectful and no bashing each other and just talk about your experience. But we are talking about culinary school. In terms of like online, like running the Instagram community, there's actually like a lot of debate on both sides.
Here's Hannah again, the sous chef and Instagram content creator from the beginning of the episode. She posted a video about culinary school asking her followers to weigh in on whether it's worth it, and about 200 people responded.
People will bash each other and people kind of, I don't know, it's interesting to like watch from a distance, and I try to encourage the whole let's just get along and talk about our own experience and where we are now. There were some really good responses. If anyone comes into my DMs asking if they should go to culinary school, I just send them that video and I'm like, read these comments. Like there's over 200 comments about people just sharing their stories. But it's just interesting to see like some people get super heated.
We asked that question at the very beginning of the episode. Is culinary school worth it? And people have some really strong responses. Maybe it's because so many cooks have invested a lot of time and money into school and don't want to see it become obsolete. Maybe it's because there's a lot of identity wrapped up in the idea that anyone can work their way from dishwasher to chef. It's impossible to answer the question for everyone. More than ever, there are so many ways to earn the title of chef, and so many different definitions of who is or isn't a chef. Certainly, it is in the best interest of institutions to have some control over how that is defined. But no one place holds all the knowledge of the industry. The cycle of culture shift to institutional change is a slow one. As early career chefs have more options of ways to enter the industry, their influence over institutions may grow as demand for these programs wanes. It's a complicated web of power that has a lot to do with the shifts in culture. But it's also still a business that in the end comes down to finances and what the customers, i.e. students, demand. So maybe the question isn't, is culinary school worth it? But what has to be done to make it worth it? Follow us in your favorite podcast app and find us on various social channels at Copper and Heat to keep up to date throughout the season. And we always love hearing from you. I would love to hear what you think about culinary school, so send us a message on our website or in our DMs. This episode was produced by Rachel Palmer and me, Katie Osuna. Sound design and scoring was by Ricardo Osuna. Mixing and mastering was by Adrian Lilly. Thanks so much for listening.